Hey, everybody, and welcome to another deep dive. We love to get into all these, interesting topics. And today we're going to be exploring fallacies.
Oh, yeah, fallacies.
Those sneaky little...
Tricks of argumentation.
Exactly. We're talking about the stuff that makes you sound really convincing,
Even when...
even when you're completely wrong.
Exactly. And our source material for this is a very interesting book called How to Win Every Argument.
Very mischievous.
I like it. It is, it lays out all these fallacies.
And it shows you how to use them, too.
Yes, it does.
Which we're not advocating for.
No, of course not.
But I think it's fascinating because when... You know how someone might try to use them against you?
All right.
It helps you defend against them.
Exactly.
A little bit of intellectual...
Theoreticity.
Exactly, yeah.
So you can reverse the hold.
That's right. So let's sort of unpack this. What are fallacies?
Well, in the simplest terms, a fallacy is a flaw in reasoning.
Okay.
That makes an argument invalid even if it sounds convincing on the surface.
So it's like that, beautiful house that's built on a terrible foundation.
Exactly. It could be,
It looks great.
It looks great, but don't look too close.
Don't look too close.
Yeah.
And there are different ways.
How do we categorize these?
Well, the book categorizes them into different groups. For example, we have the irrelevant appeals.
Okay, so these are the ones where they're trying to bring in information or ideas that don't actually relate to the argument itself.
Exactly. They're trying to distract you from the actual argument at hand.
Okay.
So, for example, let's say you are debating the merits of a new policy, and somebody is, well, the person who proposed this policy has been divorced 3 times, so how can we trust their judgment?
Ah, yes. Attack the person, not the argument. I think that's called ad hominem.
Ad hominem, exactly.
But why do we fall for that, though? Is it because we're just sort of, more drawn to gossip?
Well, I think we are naturally drawn to information about other people, but it also plays on our tendency to make snap judgments. Oh, so if we think somebody is flawed in one area of their life, we might be more likely to think they're flawed in other areas, too.
Exactly, even if those areas are completely unrelated.
Well, it's like saying because you burn dinner, you can't possibly be a good musician.
Exactly. The two things have nothing to do with each other.
Okay, so what are some other irrelevant appeals?
Well, there's the bandwagon fallacy.
Oh, the bandwagon fallacy.
Yeah.
So that's basically saying if a lot of people believe something, it must be true.
Everyone's doing it, so it must be right.
So that's like saying if there's a line out the door at a restaurant, the food must be amazing.
Right. But what if everyone's just following the crowd?
Yeah, they don't even know.
Without actually knowing if the food is any good.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I guess, where social proof comes in, right? Because we think, okay, well, everybody else is doing it.
Yeah.
So it must be good.
Yeah, it must be the right thing to do.
It must be safe. It must be.
It must be true.
It must be true. Okay, what about, I feel like this one comes up a lot in, like, student life. The appeal to pity.
Oh, yes. Ad misericordiam.
Ad misericordiam.
Where you try to win an argument by making people feel sorry for you.
Oh, yeah. I've seen this so many times. It's like, if you don't give me a passing grade on this, I'm going to lose my scholarship and then my dreams are crushed.
Exactly, but that doesn't actually address...
It's true, though.
It may be true.
Strategy.
But it doesn't address the student's performance in the class.
It's like trying to win a race by crying instead of running faster.
Exactly. It's a way of bypassing the actual criteria.
Yeah. You got to put in the work.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about attacking the person, appealing to popularity, pulling at those heartstrings.
Right.
Are there more?
Oh, there are plenty more.
Lay it on me.
Well, there's the appeal to force.
Okay, appeal to force.
Which is a little bit more aggressive.
This is where it gets a little scary.
It can be, instead of persuading you with logic or evidence, they try to intimidate you into agreeing with them.
Like, agree with me or else.
Exactly. Or if you don't support my position, you'll regret it.
So no more Mr. Nice Guy. So instead of having a healthy debate, we're just going to...
resort to threats.
We're going to threaten each other.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, well, that's not a good way to win a debate, I don't think.
It might win the argument, but...
Okay, fair enough.
It's not fair.
What about this one? This one's interesting, the red herring.
Ah, the red herring.
Is that about, like, distracting with something smelly, or...?
It is about distraction. It's introducing irrelevant information to divert attention away from the main point.
So it's like, the pickpocket who says, look, a distraction.
Exactly.
And while you're distracted...
They're taking your wallet.
They're taking your wallet.
Okay.
So give me an example. How does this work in like a real argument?
So let's say you're arguing about climate change and somebody brings up Hillary Clinton's emails.
Oh, yeah.
That's a complete distraction.
It might be worth talking about at some point.
It may be, but
And not now.
it's not relevant to the argument about climate change.
Right. Okay. So we've got those irrelevant appeals. We've got attacking the person, appealing to popularity.
Right.
Tugging at those heartstrings. We've got threats.
Yes.
And then we've got distractions.
Yeah. Exactly.
Fancying how subtle and yet how effective these can be.
That's the dangerous thing about fallacies. They often appeal to our emotions or biases,
Right.
making them seem more persuasive than they actually are.
It's like they're short-circuiting our logic.
Exactly.
Okay, well, now I'm seeing the world in a whole new way.
That's the power of understanding fallacies. You can start to see through those deceptive tactics.
All right, so now let's move on to another category of fallacies. And these are the ones that fall into flawed logic.
Okay, so now we're getting into arguments that are fundamentally flawed at their core.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, they often exploit our tendency to oversimplify things.
Okay.
Or to make quick judgments based on limited information.
All right, lay it on me. What are some of these flawed logic fallacies?
Well, let's start with the false cause fallacy.
Okay, false cause.
Also known as post hoc, ergo propter hoc.
That's a mouthful.
It is a bit of a mouthful, but it essentially means after this, therefore because of this.
Okay, so just because B happened after
Yeah.
A caused B.
Exactly. It's mistaking correlation for causation.
Like saying, I wore my lucky socks and my team won, therefore my socks are lucky.
Exactly.
And this is a big one, right? Because
It is a big one.
especially these days with all the information we have access to,
Yeah.
it's so easy to make those connections.
Especially with headlines. Coffee linked to longer lifespan.
Yeah.
Well, okay, maybe, but
Yeah.
there's probably other factors involved.
There's probably other factors involved. Okay, so
Yeah.
we got to be careful about that one. What about this one? I've heard this one a lot. The false dilemma.
The false dilemma. That's the classic either-or trap.
Okay.
Where you're presented with only two options, when in reality, there may be many more.
So it's that whole you're either with us or against us.
Exactly, and it's a way of oversimplifying a complex issue.
Right.
And forcing people to choose sides when there might be a middle ground.
But why does that work on us? Why do we fall for that?
Well, I think our brains like to categorize things.
Okay, so it's simple.
They like simple answers.
We want that certainty.
Yeah. Exactly.
Black or white.
Yeah, it can be uncomfortable to grapple with ambiguity.
Okay, so sometimes it's not that simple.
No, it's not.
It's not just black and white.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we've got false dilemma. What other flawed logic fallacies are lurking out there?
Well, there's the infamous slippery slope fallacy.
Oh, the slippery slope. So this is the one where we assume if we do this one little thing, it's going to lead to all this other crazy stuff.
A whole cascade of increasingly negative consequences.
It's like if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk, and then he's going to want to take a nap in your bed, and then he's going to want to move in and take over your house.
Exactly.
Why do we love this one so much, though? Why do we love the slippery slope?
Well, I think we are drawn to stories, and the slippery slope fallacy creates a very compelling narrative.
Yeah. Of escalating chaos and disaster.
It's like all those, fear-mongering tactics in politics, like, oh, if we allow this one thing to happen, then
society will crumble.
Society will crumble. Yeah. But the key is to ask,
is there any actual evidence?
Is there any evidence?
Yeah. To support those claims?
Yeah. Okay. So often there isn't.
It's just speculation.
It's just conjecture and fear-mongering.
Okay. So another one, this one, I think I fall for this one sometimes. The hasty generalization.
Ah, yes, where you make a sweeping conclusion based on insufficient evidence.
It's like that person who visits a foreign country for like a week, has one bad experience, and then decides that everybody in that country is terrible.
Exactly. It's like saying all teenagers are rude because you met one rude teenager.
Yeah, so it's basically judging an entire group of people or things based on one or two experiences.
Exactly. It's about jumping to conclusions without enough data.
Okay, and then this one, I feel like this one comes up in debates a lot. The straw man fallacy.
The straw man.
What is a straw man doing in a logic debate?
Well, imagine you build a straw man. It's very easy to knock over.
Right.
And in this fallacy, you misrepresent your opponent's argument.
Oh, so you're making it easier to attack.
Exactly. You're making it weaker.
So it's like setting up this kind of flimsy version of their argument just so you can tear it down and be like, haha, I win.
Exactly.
Okay, give me an example of that.
Okay, so let's say somebody says, we need stricter gun control laws to prevent mass shootings.
Okay.
A straw man argument would be, so you want to take away everyone's guns and leave us defenseless.
Which is not what the original.
No, that's a complete misrepresentation of the
know.
original argument.
So it's like, we're playing chess, but I've secretly swapped out your queen for a pawn.
Exactly.
And you don't know.
Yeah.
And so it's not really a fair fight.
No, it's not.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We've got those irrelevant appeals that are trying to distract us from the argument.
Right.
We've got those flawed logic fallacies that are just like cracks in the foundation of the argument itself.
Yes. And they're all around us.
Oh, it's everywhere.
Shaping our perceptions.
Like the little hidden persuaders whispering in our ears.
Trying to get us to believe things that may not be true.
That may not be true, and we don't even realize it.
And that's why it's so important to understand them.
Yeah. I feel like I'm putting on a new pair of glasses and I can see the world.
In a whole new light.
In a whole new light. All right, so stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we're going to explore even more fascinating fallacies.
Oh, yes, we're just getting started.
We're just getting started. There's a whole world of fallacies out there just waiting to be discovered.
That's right.
All right, see you in part 2.
Welcome back, fallacy detectives. Ready for some more?
I'm ready to dive back into this world of sneaky arguments and, those persuasive tricks that sometimes we don't even realize are working on us.
Yeah, exactly. And, we've talked about those irrelevant appeals, those flawed logic fallacies. But now let's get into some of the tricks that involve tricky language.
Okay, yeah. I'm fascinated by this idea that words themselves can be used to mislead or persuade.
Yeah, it's like a magician using sleight of hand
Right.
to make you believe something that's not really true.
Okay, so what's a good example of that?
Well, one of the most common examples is equivocation.
Okay, equivocation.
Yeah.
I've heard of that one. It's basically using the same word with different meanings
Exactly.
to create confusion.
Right. So, for example, I promised I'd be home early. Well, 3 a.m. is early for me.
Oh, yeah, technically true.
Yeah.
But definitely playing on two different interpretations of the word early.
Exactly. And that's how equivocation works.
So it's like you're building a bridge out of words,
Okay.
but the words are constantly shifting their meaning.
Right.
So the bridge is really unstable.
Exactly. It creates a false sense of logical connection.
Okay, so equivocation, we got to watch out for that one.
Yeah.
What about this one? I've heard this one too, amphibole.
Amphibole. Ah, yes. This one uses ambiguous grammar or sentence structure to create confusion.
Okay, so it's like those signs that say slow children playing.
Exactly. Does it mean that children are slow, or are you supposed to slow down?
I love those. I mean, it's funny, but it's also kind of dangerous.
Right. It can be, yeah.
Because it could lead to misunderstandings.
Exactly. The fallacy lies in the ambiguity
Okay.
of the structure.
So it's like setting a trap
Yeah,
where the meaning can kind of snap shut on you depending on how you interpret it.
exactly.
Okay, and then this one seems really potent. Loaded words.
Loaded words, yeah. These are the emotional firecrackers of fallacies.
Ooh.
Instead of presenting facts or logic,
They're going right for the gut.
they're appealing to your emotions,
Right.
to your deeply held beliefs or prejudices.
So it's like instead of saying thrifty, you say cheap.
Exactly. Or describing a political policy as patriotic versus nationalistic.
Right. It's the same idea.
Same idea, but
One has a much more, charged.
emotional charge.
Emotional charge, yes. And I think it's amazing how much emotional baggage a single word can carry.
Yeah, it's incredible. It can evoke strong positive or negative reactions without actually providing any evidence.
It's like sneaking a spoonful of sugar into a bitter medicine.
Exactly.
You don't even realize you're swallowing something you might not like.
Yeah, you're distracted by the sweetness.
Okay, so we've got those tricky language fallacies. Now, I'm curious, are there any fallacies that specifically target our tendency to over-rely on experts or authorities?
Oh, absolutely. There's one that comes up all the time. It's called the appeal to authority.
Okay, appeal to authority. So that's basically saying if somebody in a position of authority says it, it must be true.
Exactly. And it might be a scientist, a doctor, a religious leader,
Celebrity.
a celebrity, anyone who's perceived as having expertise or credibility.
But just because somebody's an expert in one area doesn't mean they're right about everything, right?
Exactly. For example, a famous actor might be great at entertaining people, but that doesn't make them an expert on climate change.
Yeah, so it's like saying, well, this celebrity uses this brand of toothpaste, so it must be the best.
Exactly. And it can be very persuasive because we often rely on experts to guide our decisions.
Well, especially when we don't have the time to do our own research.
Exactly.
Or we don't have the expertise.
Right. We're not all scientists.
Right, okay. But we got to remember, experts can be wrong.
Of course, they're human.
They're human. They can be biased.
Exactly.
They might have agendas.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not about rejecting expertise altogether.
No. Of course not.
It's about being discerning, right?
Exactly.
Asking those tough questions.
Right.
Doing your own research.
Trust but verify.
Trust but verify. I like that. Okay, now what about this one? This one comes up a lot. I think the appeal to tradition.
Ah, yes, the appeal to tradition. We've always done it this way, so it must be the best way.
It's like those families with their secret recipes,
Right.
passed down for generations.
Right.
And they refuse to change a single ingredient, even though there might be a better way to make it.
Exactly. Tradition can be a powerful force.
Right. It gives us comfort.
It gives us stability.
But just because something's been done a certain way for a long time
Doesn't mean it's the best way.
doesn't mean it's the best way. Yeah, so it's like saying horse-drawn carriages are still the best mode of transportation because they were used for centuries.
Exactly. The appeal to tradition can hinder progress and innovation.
Right. We got to be willing to adapt and evolve.
Absolutely.
Okay, now, is there a fallacy that's kind of the opposite of that,
Oh, yes, there is.
where we assume something must be better just because it's new?
The appeal to novelty.
The appeal to novelty. Okay, so this is like all those ads that say, try our latest product. It's the future of technology.
Exactly. But what if it's just a slightly fancier version of the old product?
Right. With a bigger price tag.
With a bigger price tag, exactly. It plays on our desire for the latest and greatest.
We always want the new shiny thing.
Yes, we do, but new doesn't always mean better.
True, true.
Mm.
Okay, what about the anecdotal fallacy? I feel like this one comes up a lot in casual conversations.
Oh, yeah. The anecdotal fallacy, it's mistaking personal experiences for general truths.
So it's like saying my grandfather smoked his whole life and lived to be 90, so smoking can't be that bad for you.
Exactly. But one person's experience doesn't invalidate years of scientific research
Right,
about the dangers of smoking.
right. We got to look at the bigger picture,
We do.
not just our own little bubble.
Exactly.
Okay, so anecdotal fallacy. What about this one? This one sounds kind of intriguing. The Texas sharpshooter fallacy.
Ah, the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. This one involves manipulating data
Okay.
to fit a predetermined conclusion.
So like cherry picking the evidence.
Exactly like a sharpshooter who randomly fires a bunch of bullets at a barn wall and then draws a target around the tightest cluster of bullet holes
Oh.
and claims they're a marksman.
So they're making it look like they were aiming for that all along.
Exactly. They're manipulating the data to fit their desired outcome.
And this happens a lot, right? Like with companies that highlight positive customer reviews but bury the negative ones.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Or politicians who cherry pick statistics
That's-
to make their policies look better than they are.
Exactly. It's about being aware of that selective presentation of data.
Right. We got to look at the whole picture,
The full picture.
not just the parts that fit a certain narrative.
Exactly.
And I feel like this is especially important these days with all the talk of fake news and misinformation.
Oh, yeah. It's more important than ever to be critical of the information we're consuming.
Okay, so Texas sharpshooter fallacy.
Hmm.
What about the gambler's fallacy? This one sounds interesting.
The gambler's fallacy, this one's all about mistaking independent events for dependent ones.
Okay, I'm not sure I follow that.
Okay, so imagine you're flipping a coin.
Okay.
You flip it 5 times in a row, and it lands on heads every time.
All right, that's pretty unlikely, but it could happen.
It could happen, but the fallacy is thinking that because it's landed on heads 5 times in a row, it's more likely to land on tails on the next flip.
Oh, so it's like thinking that the coin has a memory.
Exactly, like it's keeping track.
It's due for tails.
It's due for a tails to even things out.
But in reality...
But in reality, each coin flip is an independent event.
Right.
The previous flips have no influence on the outcome of the next flip.
So the odds are still 50-50.
Exactly.
Okay, so the gambler's fallacy is basically assuming that past events somehow influence the probability of future events, even when those events are completely independent of each other.
Exactly.
And I can see how this could be really dangerous, especially for people who are gambling.
Oh, yeah. It can lead to some very bad decisions.
Because they think, oh, I've been losing all night. I'm due for a win.
Right. But the odds haven't changed.
The odds haven't changed, right? Okay, so we've covered some pretty tricky fallacies in this part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've got those linguistic tricks, those appeals to authority and tradition, those statistical manipulations.
Right. And they can all distort our understanding of reality.
It's like our brains are playing tricks on us.
Yeah, sometimes they are.
And we don't even realize it.
And that's why it's so important to be aware of these fallacies.
It's like we need to develop these mental antibodies to protect ourselves from these persuasive but flawed arguments.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dives, where we're going to explore even more fallacies, and I think we're going to get into some of the psychology behind why we're so susceptible to these things.
Yeah, we're going to delve into the psychology of persuasion.
All right, this is getting really interesting. See you in part 3. All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into logical fallacies.
The grand finale.
Grand finale.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground so far.
We have.
All those sneaky tactics and tricky arguments.
All those ways to win arguments.
Exactly. And, I feel like we're starting to develop this, mental toolkit to spot these fallacies.
Yeah.
And to defend ourselves against them.
Absolutely.
But what I'm really curious about now is why are we so susceptible to these fallacies in the first place?
Yeah. Why do they work?
Yeah, is it just that we're, not all logic-loving robots? Or are there deeper psychological reasons why these persuasive but flawed arguments are so effective?
Well, there are definitely psychological factors at play here.
Okay, lay it on me.
One key factor is our tendency to rely on cognitive shortcuts.
Okay, shortcuts.
Yeah, what psychologists call heuristics.
Heuristics, reminding what those are again.
They're essentially mental shortcuts that allow us to make quick decisions
Okay.
and judgments without having to process all the available information.
So it's like going with your gut.
Exactly. It's a way of simplifying things.
Makes sense.
So we don't get overwhelmed.
Right. We can't analyze every single piece of information that comes our way.
Exactly. We don't have time for that.
Right. Okay, so heuristics are helpful,
That can be very helpful.
but they can also lead us astray.
Yes. Especially when those shortcuts are based on faulty assumptions or biases.
And that's where the fallacies come in.
Exactly. They exploit those cognitive shortcuts.
Those mental blind spots.
Yes, those little gaps in our reasoning.
Right. Okay, so give me an example of how this works with a specific fallacy.
Okay, well, let's take the availability heuristic.
Availability heuristic. Okay.
This one makes us more likely to believe something if it's easily recalled,
Okay.
or if we've recently been exposed to similar information.
So if we've just seen a news report about a shark attack,
Right.
we might be more likely to think, oh my God, sharks are everywhere.
Exactly, even though statistically shark attacks are extremely rare.
Right, but because it's so vivid in our minds,
Exactly.
and that's where fallacies like the appeal to fear come in, right?
Exactly. They play on those heightened fears
Yeah.
and anxieties.
Okay, so it's not just about logic.
No, it's not just about logic.
It's about understanding how our brains work.
Exactly. It's about the psychology of persuasion.
Right, and how those cognitive biases can make us vulnerable to these, persuasive but flawed arguments.
Exactly. And another key psychological factor is our need for social belonging.
Social belonging.
We're social creatures.
Yeah.
We have a deep-seated desire to fit in,
Right, to be part of the group.
to be accepted.
Right, and I guess that's where fallacies like the bandwagon fallacy come in.
Exactly, the bandwagon fallacy, the appeal to popularity.
Yeah, they make us feel like we're missing out
Right, or that we're going against the grain.
if we don't agree with them.
Exactly, they create that sense of us versus them, so
Yeah.
we feel pressured to conform.
Yeah, there's safety in numbers, right?
Yes.
But sometimes
Okay.
that safety can be an illusion,
Exactly.
leading us
That
to
makes-
accept things that might not be true.
Just because we don't want to rock the boat.
Right, okay, now what about this one? I've heard this one a lot. Confirmation bias.
Ah, confirmation bias. This is a big one.
So tell me about that.
This is our tendency to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs.
So we see what we want to see.
Exactly. We're more likely to pay attention to information that aligns with our pre-existing beliefs.
And ignore information that challenges those beliefs.
Exactly. We tend to dismiss or downplay anything that contradicts what we already believe.
So if we already believe that vaccines are dangerous,
Right.
we're more likely to seek out sources that support that belief.
Exactly. And we're more likely to ignore or discredit sources that present evidence to the contrary,
Even if those sources are more credible.
even if they're experts in the field.
Right. And I guess this confirmation bias can make us particularly susceptible to fallacies like the straw man fallacy.
Exactly, because we're already predisposed to disagree with the other side.
Right.
We might not even notice that their argument has been distorted.
Okay, so our brains are basically filtering out information
Yeah.
that doesn't fit with our worldview.
Exactly, and that can be very dangerous.
Yeah, okay, so it's not just about being smarter or more logical.
No, it's not.
It's about understanding these, deeper psychological tendencies
Right.
that can really cloud our judgment.
Exactly, and make us vulnerable to these persuasive but flawed arguments.
Okay, so what's the solution? What can we do about this?
Well, that's where critical thinking comes in.
Critical thinking.
It's about being aware of our own biases,
Oh,
questioning our assumptions.
and demanding evidence.
Exactly. Don't just accept things at face value,
Even if it comes from a trusted source.
even if it's something you've always believed.
Right. Okay. So critical thinking is like this, mental muscle that we need to exercise
Exactly.
to get stronger.
The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Right. And the better equipped we are to, resist those persuasive but flawed arguments.
Absolutely.
So this deep dive into logical fallacies, it hasn't just been about learning a bunch of, fancy terms.
No.
It's been about understanding ourselves,
Right.
understanding how our minds work.
And how those mental processes can be exploited.
Exactly. And how we can protect ourselves from that manipulation.
Absolutely.
So, dear listener, we encourage you to keep exploring this world of logic and critical thinking.
Yes.
Question everything. Demand evidence.
Don't be afraid to challenge those assumptions.
I mean your own.
Even your own.
Because the more we understand these fallacies,
The better equipped we are to make informed decisions.
exactly, and to navigate this increasingly complex world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of logical fallacies.